You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Business owners and entrepreneurs, if you think 10xing your business means you need to work 10 times harder, well, I have great news for you. With us today is Keith Ellis. He's an author and a #1 superpower coach. He's going to be talking to us today about all these business tips and tricks on how we can 10x our business and our life. Keith Ellis, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Thanks, Chris.
Really appreciate you coming on to share these tips and tricks with us today. But we want to know more about your entrepreneurial journey. What were you doing before, and how did that lead you into what you're doing today?
Well, I've been in an entrepreneurial mode for a long time. I started some companies and joined some companies that were already started, those kind of stuff, always in the high technology world. Technology's fascinated me. I'm not a technologist per se. I just can't stop thinking about it. I wrote a novel a while back, a thriller, and it was about quantum computing. Where'd that come from? I have no idea. It just fascinates me. So I worked in the high-tech world for a long time. And I joined a few years ago, probably 15 years ago, I joined a high-tech startup called lynda.com. And they were pioneers in the online learning space, which was, this is before it was huge. And they wanted me to start a new market for them. So they recruited me to do that. I joined them. That was successful. Then along comes a company called LinkedIn and buys us. And so suddenly we're part of $1.5 billion, actually multi-billion-dollar company, but they paid like $1.5 billion for the company, which was interesting. It was a new experience for me. It was really cool to be bought by a bigger company. So that was successful. And then a year after that, Microsoft bought LinkedIn. So now I know what it feels like to be a small fish as you work your way up into the belly of the larger and larger and larger fish. At each stage, I was ready to leave because I'm not a big company guy. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. It was a terrific experience, both with LinkedIn and then with Microsoft. And then eventually I just said, there were a whole bunch of things bubbling around in my head. I'd written some books that were good, personal development books, a book about goal setting, a book about the questions you ask yourself. But there was something missing, and it was just kind of percolating in my head. And then I put it all together into this new book that's coming out in October. And just said, okay, I got to get out of working for somebody else is what it amounts to. It's time to do my own thing. And that's the longer story of how I ended up here.
What an incredible journey. Very cool to be a part of that experience, getting in on the ground floor with a company and then to get eaten by a much bigger fish and then an even bigger fish at that point.
Yep.
That is really cool, but it taught you some life lessons along the way. And I hear from many other entrepreneurs, once they're in that entrepreneurial lifestyle, it's hard to go back to the 9 to 5 and not think about next idea, the next big breakthrough or innovation that you want to try to tackle. And in your new book, is this going to be focusing on the 10X?
Yeah. The new book is called 10X Superpower. And the subtitle, that's my favorite part, it says, how to make the impossible easy. And that's what I do. People ask me, what's your 30-second elevator pitch? It's not even 30 seconds. I help successful entrepreneurs achieve impossible goals. That's what I do. And that's what this book is all about. And it excites me because I discovered some principles. I didn't invent anything for the most part. I just kind of borrowed from all kinds of sources. What do they call it? It's plagiarism if you borrow from one source or steal from one source. And it's art if you steal from a bunch of sources. I don't know what it is, but I got lots of sources. And they just all came together in this sort of new thing that under the sun, this idea of the 10X superpower. And achieving the impossible, which we've all done, by the way. We just don't realize it. So it's sort of bringing this instinct that we all have, bringing it out and saying, you did that here, you could do it here. And that's a really empowering place to be because you have this reference experience. I don't think I can do that. Wait a minute, I've already done it. Okay, I can do it. And it changes everything.
Wow, I love that. For those who are trying to 10X their business, kind of the way that you just described, maybe it's not so much being within the same business model, but if you can apply those principles, is it going into another industry? Is it doing a new service line, like a new product offering? What are some of the tips and tricks for 10Xing our business?
Your lead-in actually was brilliant because it answers the question up front. To go 10, I'm talking literally 10 times what you've got now. If you want to quantify it, maybe you're talking about revenue. Maybe you're talking about number of customers. If you want to look at qualitative measures like health, relationships, happiness, I'm talking about literally taking those and making them 10 times better. And what you said at the beginning that was so brilliant is it's actually easier to do that than to do what you're doing now. I think probably 1 in 100 people are ready to do this. And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, I don't have any hard scientific data to explain that. But I think a big piece of it is if you hear 10x improvement, you immediately think, I've got to work 10 times harder. And nobody can work 10 times harder. I mean, the typical approach to life is, I want to grow my business by 20% this year. That's a heavy lift. That's a good growth rate, right? So that's like taking a bag of cement that weighs 20% of your body weight, throwing it over your shoulder and walking around with it for the next year, right? You can do it. It's hard work. So you hear 10 times, that's 1,000%, right? You hear 10 times and you say, can I take a bag of cement that weighs 10 times what I do, throw it over my shoulder? No. 1, I can't lift it, and 2, it'll crush me, right? So people go, I can't handle that. Their brain can't wrap around it. But when you understand what I mean by 10x and achieving the impossible, when you understand that, and you've done it before, which is an interesting thing, you realize it's actually easier because you do things differently. What you just touched on a second ago, do you change business? Do you do whatever? Conventional wisdom got you where you are. It won't get you where you want to go. So this is turning all that on its head. In psychological terms, it's pattern interrupts. It's breaking a bunch of things that we were taught, ways we were taught to think, and it's thinking differently about your thinking. And when you put all that together, it's not only possible to do the impossible, you get to the point where it becomes easy, which really freaks people out. But that's essentially what I'm selling. My book cost $10,000. And there's a reason it cost $10,000. It's a test. If you think $10,000, you got to be crazy to pay $10,000 to get a book that'll teach you how to do the impossible. Doesn't matter what I priced the book at. If I gave it away, it would never do you any good, right? But if you believe I'm worth that, taking my life, my business, and growing it by a factor of 10, yeah, that's worth 10 grand. So it's a money back guarantee, but it's a weird thing because I'm leading with this price for a reason. I'm saying this is how valuable this is. And you have to commit to it because guess who's doing the work? You are. I'm just the coach. I'm what I call a superpower coach. I teach you how to use this superpower. You're doing the heavy lifting. So either you're in it or you're not. Either you're committed or you're not. I can't make that happen. Years ago, there's an old saying, selling ice to Eskimos. I was a pretty successful salesperson in lots of different roles and sales manager and all this stuff. And he's so good he can sell ice to Eskimos. I never had any interest in that. I never wanted to sell somebody something they didn't want. Maybe that was why I was successful. It made no sense to me. I didn't know how to make somebody want something they didn't want, but I was really good selling them something they wanted. So that's where I am now. If you really are committed to taking your life to the next level, to the 10x level, I can help you with that. I can sell you that. If you're not committed, nothing I can do for you. Doesn't matter what price. Again, if it's free, I can't help you.
Right, absolutely. And sometimes that secret lies within us. It's like, okay, do we need to take a look at our business practices? Just as you described with the Eskimos and the ice, what is something within our service line or our product offering that is flying off the shelves that people absolutely want, that they can't get enough of? And if you don't have one of those things, you have to find one. And now suddenly you will be getting sales on repeat. And this 10x seems more doable than it did impossible earlier. And I think for the 1 out of 100 entrepreneurs that you mentioned earlier, the ones who are actually going to get it and want to take action on it, the ones that hear 10x and they get scared and it's absolutely impossible, they're not going to be the ones who are going to take action on it. But the one crazy, innovative guy who says that's worth it, they are the ones who are going to take that book and not be shelf help, but actual self-help, who are actually going to take the action. And they're going to see the value in your book.
Yes, I love the shelf help terminology. That's exactly what it is. And it really comes down to bringing all the cliches in here, but they're all true. You can lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink, all that stuff. I can't help somebody get thirsty. But if you bring your thirst to me, I can help you slake your thirst with this thing, with this idea. Also, one of the things that used to frustrate the heck out of me was this 80-20 rule, Pareto's principle. 80% of what you do creates 20% of your results. 20% of what you do creates 80% of your results. And I would look at that, whatever business I was in, and I'd say, this is great. How do I figure out what the 20% are? It's like you figure it out after the fact, after you've spent a year doing something. These things probably helped, or maybe not. We didn't really know how to capture the data even going through this. So what 10X thinking does, this is called constraint theory. It's like in psychology. What 10X thinking does is it forces you to restrict your attention to this impossible goal. You want to take some part of your life or all of your life, because the way this works is if you set a goal in some part of your life, relationships, business, whatever it is, and you start doing it, you suddenly start changing other things in your life. It's like magic. It's just amazing how it just ripples through because you're changing who you are. You're transforming yourself from somebody who can't do something. In other words, what impossible means, because I'm real serious when I say I help people do the impossible. What impossible means to an individual is I can't do this, right? The way I believe I cannot do this. It doesn't mean it's impossible in the terms of the physical laws of the universe, the quantum physics. We're not talking about that. We're talking about essentially the beliefs. And what happens is you begin to develop capabilities. I show you how to develop capabilities because you've got this big goal, this impossible goal. You're committed to something you can't do. And then you get a new capability and suddenly you're looking at things a little differently. It's like, wait a minute, this may be possible. Then pretty soon you're doing all this stuff and then you achieve your goal and then you look back and that was kind of easy. It makes absolutely no sense. But we've got all these reference experiences. Think of a toddler learning to walk. How many times did you fall down before you gave up and decided you didn't want to learn to walk?
I still fall over to this day and I still get back up.
That's the point. You didn't give up. We don't give up. We are deeply programmed instinctively not to give up. If you think about it, when you're crawling around on the floor, it's physically impossible for you to walk. Emotionally, psychologically, physically, you can't walk, but you keep trying until you can walk. You develop a new capability. And then what happens with walking? It becomes easy. People say, okay, you're a developmental stage, you're an infant, none of that counts. How about when you learn to talk? How about when you learn to read? How about when you learn to write? But that's still early. Okay, how about when you learn to ride a bike? Now, I grew up with 3 brothers. They would go right around the neighborhood. I'm on training wheels falling over. What they were doing was impossible, but I was committed to doing it. So then I learned how to ride a bike. I learned to do the impossible. And now this has become a joke in cliche. I couldn't forget how to ride a bike if I wanted to. That's how easy it became, right? And then you said, well, that doesn't count either. You're just trying to figure out this. Then you said, what about driving a car? Same thing happened. One of my favorites is, let's talk about income. Taking your income to a level that's 10 times where it is now. Can you remember a time when your income was 1/10 what it is now? If you're talking to any successful entrepreneur, they say, hell yes. I can tell you exactly when that was. I couldn't afford to take somebody out on a date, that kind of thing. And now here you are, 10 times or maybe way more than that. So you actually went from something that was here and you 10 times it or 100 times it. You've already done this. What I'm teaching people to do, this sounds strange because I'm charging 10 grand to do it. I'm teaching people how to do what they already know how to do, but they don't know they know how to do it, right?
Yeah, it's a superpower they need to unlock. They don't know it's hidden inside of them yet, and it's someone to unleash it. I love it. With all your business experience or life experience, as you mentioned, you're not bringing forth new information per se. This is collective knowledge of past years, the Dale Carnegies and all very important people that have influenced us. What was the biggest shift for you in your business, your aha moment, something that you think other entrepreneurs are kind of missing out on?
The real shift was just thinking 10X. In other words, when I started this coaching business, I set some goals and I'm in the process of writing a book about 10Xing, and I applied it to myself. And I said, I think I can generate this much revenue in a year, this much in 3 years. And then I said, put a 0 by that. Now I've got this bigger number, and that was impossible. And the trick to this, you actually have to believe it's impossible. If you think, okay, I think I can do that, which is kind of how we're taught, make it within reach, you're not being ambitious enough. You're missing the point. But once I did that, once I put that 0 in front of it, my attention was like I had these blinders on, but really good blinders. I was forced to focus on what would work. So I was talking about the 80-20% stuff. What 10X thinking does, and this is my advice to any entrepreneur or anybody in any walk of life, is it forces you to discard the 80%. And you say, how do I know what the 80% is? Set an impossible goal. And now you think, this isn't as hard as it looked. Now I'm focused on only those things that'll get me there. And you immediately, just intuitively start discarding things. You say, well, I could do this. That'll get me 50%, not 1,000%. No, that won't do it. And then you start thinking, and you come up with something and say, and this is typically how this conversation goes with people, with the clients I coach, and it happened this way with me. It was like, I could do it if I did like one or two of things. So 1,000 possibilities suddenly are narrowed to one or two things. And now you've got this incredible clarity. That's the answer. That's what I do. It was always there, but I couldn't separate the signal from the noise. And that's really what this is about. The most important possession any of us has today is our attention. That's really what constraint theory is all about. We are no better than our weakest link. Our weakest link is our attention. And there are like 8 billion people on the planet, and sometimes it feels like all of them are trying to get our attention at the same time, right? And it drives us nuts, and we can distract ourselves. So this is really, 10X thinking is hardcore attention focusing. If you had to describe it sort of in English, what you're doing is forcing yourself to focus in a way you've never done before because you were never free to do that. What idiot would say, I'm going to 10X my life? Hey, you got to be crazy. But then you do it, it's like, I get it now. And the rest is fun, and it's actually easier because that's the other part of this. Imagine how much easier your life becomes if you could discard the 80% that are essentially a waste of your time. And you're entirely focused on the 20%. Now you're doing stuff that you enjoy, you're passionate about, you're making things happen because you're so incredibly focused. That's what this lets you do.
That is an absolute game changer. I'm excited for it. Where can people who are interested in learning more about the 10X system, and how can they connect with you online?
Okay, so 10xsuperpower.com or keithellis.com. Either one will get you essentially to the same landing page. And the landing page is the quiz. It's what I call the 10X reality check. I said earlier that only 1 in 100 people are really ready to do this for whatever reason. I can spend all day long trying to figure that out, but for whatever reason, that's been my experience. This test helps you figure out if you're that 1 in 100. And if you're not, that's cool. You've saved time. I've saved time. Everybody's happy. But if you are, then you keep going. And if you answer these questions in a way that suggests you're ready to do this, then you would actually book a discovery call with me, which is just a half an hour of coaching. It's asking you questions. Again, you're doing the heavy lifting. I just happen to know the questions to ask you. And then at that point, you get to decide whether you want to work with me. That's really important. I get to decide if I want to work with you. That's really important. If that doesn't happen, if neither of us is quite ready to do this, it's wasting everybody's time. I don't care about the money. I don't want to waste my time or yours. So 10X Superpower is where you go to take your 10X reality check and take the quiz. It takes about 5 minutes. It's kind of fun.
I love that. And we'll have links available down in the show notes and the description, so all of our guests can go ahead and check that out and get connected. Keith, as you were talking, I was just curious, do you specialize in a particular industry? Is it B2B, B2C entrepreneurs, a little bit of everybody, or the people you specifically don't work with?
I want to work with successful entrepreneurs. And what that means is somebody who's already gone through the stumbling and trying to figure out how to do the jobs of 5 different people. I mean, the first thing that happens when you start your own business is you work harder than you've ever worked in your life. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to be free. I'm not going to have a boss. It's awesome. And then you go, my God, what did I do to myself? So there's a lot of that going on. I want to get people, clients who have made that work. And that's no small thing. And then say, okay, now what? Do I take my business 10 times larger, or do I focus on social impact in the world and try to take my impact 10 times more? Or do I focus on all the relationships that I've essentially ignored while I started my business? Do I focus on my health, which I essentially ignored while I started? So what is it At this stage, you've turned that corner. You're a successful entrepreneur. You've got a thriving business, but you want more because you're an entrepreneur. And let's face it, that's kind of the definition of entrepreneurs, right? They want more and they're willing to work for it.
Yes.
So you're at that stage, and I essentially can help you figure that out and then figure out how to 10x that, whatever you've got. Put a zero behind it, right?
I love that. The ambition needs to be strong within people to actually take advantage of this, to really get to that next level. And for you, with your experience, what has been the most effective marketing strategy that you've seen? I see a lot of people who on B2B are either it's all relationships, or you have to join some Facebook groups, or maybe you host some webinars. Some people do ads or cold outbound. Has there been a good strategy for you? Is it all based on relationships? Do you like ads? I see you're writing a book. Some people use that as the lead magnet. Some people, that's the actual service offering. So it kind of works together.
Yep. So there are a lot of things to do. I've got a newsletter that is actually that I'm just starting, and it's going great. It's actually AI generated. I've been trying to figure out what to do with AI. I don't want it to write content for me. I don't want it to write sales copy. What do I do with AI? And there's this company that puts together a newsletter it doesn't write the articles. It just finds articles that are related to the topic you're interested in and the people you're trying to reach, and it puts it all together in a neat package. It's like, wow, this is incredible. It's magic. That's a great tactic. But I'll be brutally straight with you. The best tactic I've ever found is to charge $10,000 for a book.
It's smart. I love it.
Well, because nobody else is doing that. Then the second thing is, what could make a book worth $10,000, right? And there's a very clear answer for that, but you have to be open to it. If I just say, try to cram something down your throat, it doesn't work. But if I'm talking in a psychological sense, marketing sense, if I throw something out to you that sort of catches you and opens your mind to, I'm interested in this. Even though I have no interest in spending 10 grand on a book, I'd really like to know what this is about. That's a terrific way to begin a relationship with a potential client. And if they're not ready, if they're not interested, that's fine. They can sign up for the newsletter. It's free and they can get all this cool stuff. And then maybe sometime a year out or 2 years out, they go, I really should have done that 2 years ago.
All based on their perspective at that moment.
Yes.
Some people will see $10,000 book and not even think twice about it. Say, oh, I've paid more for a course, or I've paid more for this. And it's all a matter of perspective. But some great tips and tricks here. I love it. You're pretty well seasoned. I see you like to do your research. Is there a really good either like podcast, YouTuber, book series, anything that you would recommend for other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, this is going to take me way back. You mentioned the name, and it's not a name you always hear that much anymore. The original Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I was literally sitting with my grandfather when he was very old, and he started just reminiscing about stuff. And he was talking about, he grew up dirt poor in a little tiny town in Missouri, and he was sitting under a tree with a friend, and they were chatting about stuff. And he said, my grandfather, who was a self-made man, said, I'm going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And then my friend Dale said, I'm going to go to New York and I'm going to do this. And I said, Dale? He said, yeah, Dale. Dale who? He said, Dale Carnegie. So he grew, and I read the book, and I, thought the book was incredible. It was transformative, even though it was written decades before. It was perfectly relevant because it's about people, and people are everything. And here's my grandfather telling me that he grew up with Dale Carnegie. And then I actually researched it because I didn't think he was BSing me. It was like, seriously? And then I looked at Dale Carnegie, and sure enough, he grew up in the same little dirt poor town in Missouri. What can you say? But it's a great book. It's a book that probably still sells 1 million copies a year. It's that good. So that's a great place to start.
You can't go wrong with the classics. I even have a copy of Managing Through People right on my shelf here. The old books, the new books, they're all still very relevant. People haven't changed too often, like different channels, different tactics, but they all are around a foundational principle. And those you just can't rewrite. They're all the same. Yep. Keith, we only have a few more minutes. I wanted to ask, is there any other imparting wisdom you want to share with any of our guests or listeners out there?
Yeah, I want to bend back to this 10X thing, which is really the theme of the discussion, and talk about something I call the impossibility effect. And that's just what we were talking about with all the things you've done in your life that were actually impossible, and you believed they were impossible, even if you weren't particularly conscious of it. And then you became more conscious of it, and you still did stuff like that. If you can find something that is so ambitious for you, and I deal with entrepreneurs, it's easy to focus on dollars and cents, and that's because that's easy to measure. But if you can think of something and then turn it into a goal, and a goal is measurable. Now, it may be measurable in the sense of dollars and cents. It may be measurable in the sense of events, right? I will accomplish this thing by this date. So I'm not measuring that thing. I'm doing it by this date. I will enhance my relationship or add a relationship or do something special for the person I'm already in a relationship with by this date. Take my wife to Hawaii or that kind of thing. Find something that is really audacious for you to do. And if you think you can do it, you're not being audacious enough. Add the zero to it, make it impossible, and then commit to it. And this is the piece that if I'm selling anything, it's create an impossible goal that you really are passionate about. You want it to happen, but you can't. And then commit to it and watch what happens. That's where the magic starts.
Keith, it all sounds crazy and too good to be true.
It is crazy and it is too good to be true, but it's true.
It's true. I love it. Keith, you're incredible. Thank you for coming out and sharing your business wisdom with us. For all of our guests who are interested, make sure you check out the show notes. Get connected with Keith and his 10X superpowers. You're not going to regret it. Keith, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Chris, for having me.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.